Hey grade 5s, I'm hoping to do a little video like this at the beginning of each of my lessons. For history, this will be how I do the shout-outs for all the children that got the answers right to the fun question. I'll go class by class and tell you who got it right. In 5.1 it was Adam, Antonia and Kai. In 5.2, Michaela, Matthew, Trinity, Leandro and Luando. 5.3, Reese, Alexi and Carter. And 5.4, Caden, Emily and Tlotliso. So well done you guys. I'm super impressed that there's 14 of you that gave me the right answer to the question. I don't know if my question's maybe a little bit too easy, but this week's is a little bit more tricky, so make sure you listen to the information really carefully, and I hope that it'll be more than 14 of you for next week. I hope you've liked seeing my face a little bit, and you'll see it again in the next video. Okay, so a couple of instructions for today's lesson. You're going to listen to and read through the information that I give to you. Some stuff is up on the screen for you to read with me, and other stuff I explain just with my words. So you need to listen quite carefully to the explanations I give you if they're not typed out as well. You don't have to write down anything today, actually, except for your activity. So today is a listen and apply. You're going to listen to the explanations I give to you and understand what I'm telling you, and then apply the information I've given to you in the activity we do at the end. This activity will be either written or the online version that I give to you. You obviously decide which one you are going to do. And lastly will be the fun question that I was discussing with you in the previous part of this video. It's not compulsory, it's really just for fun. It's a little bit tricky today, so make sure you listen really carefully so that you can give me the right answer. Okay, so we're going to talk about how the early African farmers lived in settled chiefdoms. A few lessons ago I mentioned that a chiefdom is ruled by a chief, just like a kingdom is ruled by a king. So just remember that the chief is the most important person, the most powerful person when we're talking about the early African farmers. Okay, the African farmers lived differently to the hunter-gatherers, the sand people. They also lived differently to the herders, which we spoke about last lesson. They had to stay in one place long enough to plant, tend, and harvest their crops. Okay, we know that plants don't just grow overnight. They take quite some time to grow into something that we can use. So the African farmers had to stay in the area where they planted their plants long enough for them to be able to grow so that they could use them. They built permanent homes near their fields. Again, this is different to the sand people and the Khoikhoi because their houses were built to stand for a long time. Most of the houses were circular and up to 6 meters wide. Some of them were made of mud bricks with grass roofs, and others were dome-shaped and woven from grass. So if you look at the picture on the side over here, you can see that I've given you two different examples. The differences between them are quite obvious. You can see that this one over here is the one that is made from the mud bricks and has got the grass roof. And then this one over here is just made from woven grass and it's dome shaped. So the dome shape means that it's rounded on top. Okay, so we're going to be talking about areas called homesteads. The African farmers lived in larger groups than the herders and hunter-gatherers. We already know this. We know that there was up to 100 people sometimes in a group of African farmers. Many people were needed to work in the fields. That's why their groups of people were quite a bit bigger. The people would live with their families in homesteads, all right? And inside the walls of a homestead were huts, separate areas to store food, and these areas were called granaries, and places to keep the animals, which is called a cattle kraal. Okay, so if you look to the right of the slide over here, it shows you what a homestead looks like. So this whole picture is of a homestead. Okay, and there's a little key on the side here for you to understand what's what. And the first thing we're going to look at is the houses. So if you look at the grey sort of circles, they're the darker grey and they're bigger than the other little grey circles you see. Those are the houses. Okay, they're also called households. The household is where the wife and her children would live. All right. Then you've got the lighter grey little circles. They're called granaries. So these are your granaries. That is where they would store their grain, okay, or the plants, the crops that they had harvested. Now, what they would do is they would dig a hole in the ground and they would line the hole with clay. And the clay would stop any moisture or water from getting into that hole, and that would prevent the grain that was stored in there from going off or becoming rotten. Then you've got the green little sections around it, which are the hedges. Now, the hedges are just plants that they used as a type of fence. And you can see that it divides different sections of the homestead. And then very last on the key is the shade tree, and those are just little pieces that look exactly like trees would, and that's obviously trees occurred naturally. There's some trees that they would clear away, and there's obviously these trees that they would leave for a bit of shade. Okay, so families would live together in the homesteads. The head of the homestead, the person in charge, was the senior male, and he was often called the headman. Now, he would live with his wife, his unmarried children, and sometimes poorer relatives who needed some help. He could have more than one wife. All right, he wasn't restricted to just having one. He could often have multiple wives. Each wife, if he had more than one, would have their own hut. And like I mentioned just now, each wife would live with her children in her household or her hut. The husband or headman would share time with each wife, and because of this, he didn't need to have his own hut. He would spend time with maybe the first wife, and then move on to the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and so on. So again, looking at the same picture that I showed you just now, it describes how each wife had their own particular dwelling. So it's labeled with wife 1, second wife, third wife, fourth wife, and in this case there's a fifth wife as well, and they've each got their separate homes. Okay, now their children, until they were old enough, would live with them. Okay, when they became old enough to sort of look after themselves, they would then have their own little places or houses that they would live. So unmarried sons and daughters would also live in the homestead. Once they got married, they would move away. They would get married to their partner, and they would move away from their father's homestead. Okay, so this is to show you what a satellite picture looks like compared to the drawing that I've shown you. So on the right hand side is the satellite picture, on the left hand side is the drawing. They look very similar. You can see the hedges around the satellite image that it makes it look like a fence. You can see the different sections where each house is, or the households. And then you can see very clearly that there's a very large open section in the middle of the homestead. Now, this large open section was where the cattle would be kept, all right? And it was called a cattle kraal, okay? I'm just going to write the word out. Excuse my terrible handwriting on the slide. So a cattle kraal is where the animals were kept. Now, it's more or less in the middle of the homestead, and this is because it would be the safest place for the animals to be kept. Now, if you had a large group of sheep or goats or cows living outside of the homestead, they are easy pickings for predators like lions and leopards and cheetahs. So the cattle would be kept on the inside to protect them from the wild animals, as well as other people. Okay, other people would often try and steal the animals because animals were very important. They were a sign of wealth. All right, so they were kept in the center in the cattle kraal to keep them safe. Okay, so in the African farmers' traditions, the groups of or related families belong to what is called a lineage. Now, each and every one of you has a lineage. Your lineage is basically your family tree. Okay, it's where you came from, the ancestors that you're related to, and how you are connected to your family. All right, so all members of the lineage were related through a common ancestor. This could have been a great-great-grandfather, for example. The most respected senior men of the lineage were known as elders. Okay, and the elders were obviously living people. All of the people belonged to a clan, okay, and there's various clans, so different clans that people would belong to. A clan is formed by a number of lineages, and they share a clan name because they believe that they came from the same ancestor. Okay, so if there was, let's say, 5 different families and they believed that they all shared a common ancestor, they would have the same clan name. The children of the homestead belong to the clan of the homestead head. All right, so the sons and daughters of the headman would be part of his clan. Okay, they didn't just go and join another clan, they belonged to the clan of their father. Members of the same clan helped each other in times of need. Okay, so that's a general rule with most families. If your family needs help, then you help your family out, and that's the sort of way that the clans would work with the African farmers. Okay, so villages were made up of a whole bunch of homesteads. All right, so a collection of homesteads formed a village, and then we've got all of our different homesteads together that make one village. The homestead heads, which were also called headmen if you remember, would meet to discuss matters that affected wider community or neighborhood. So they would discuss issues that affected the whole village. So, cattle were very important to the early African farmers. They were seen as a form of wealth and power. The elders controlled the cattle belonging to the lineage. Okay? When a young man wanted to be married, he had to ask the elders for cattle to give as bride wealth to the woman's lineage. Okay, bride wealth or bride price is also known as lobola. Okay, now the young man would have to approach the elders and then take the bride wealth or the cattle to the woman's homestead which she was staying, and those cattle then belonged to her lineage. Okay, so he had to give them cattle to be able to be married to her. The way that this was agreed upon, the elders of both lineage decided how much cattle was needed for the woman to be married to the young man. The elders also served on the chief's council. Alright, so the chief is the next person we're going to discuss very quickly. The headman, who is the person who was in charge of his homestead, had to answer to the chief of the village. The chief was the most powerful person in the village. He was the wealthiest, which means he had the most cattle, and he had the largest homestead. Okay, so this is the activity that we're going to do for today's lesson. There is an online version of the activity. I've got the link down below in the description box, and I'm going to try my best to make a click link on the video as well. If it doesn't work, as always, the link is in the description box at the bottom. For those of you doing the written part, I will read through the questions with you and explain a little bit if I need to, and just stick around or fast forward a little bit if you're waiting for the fun question that'll come after I've explained the activity. So the first part, you're just giving me one word for the following terms. The first one, the person in charge of a homestead. The second one, the place where a wife and her children lived. Okay, there's a couple of different answers you can give me for that one, but whichever one you remember the best, you give me that. Question C, a group of households is called a what? And D, the most powerful person in the village is who? Then question 2, where was the cattle kraal in the homestead? Okay, what area, or where was it located within the homestead? Question 3, does the position of the cattle kraal tell us that the cattle were important or unimportant? Okay, explain a little bit. Tell me why you think they were either important or unimportant. Question 4, who had the most cattle in the village? And question 5, what is another word for that we use for bride wealth? Okay. Finally, our fun question. This one's a little bit more tricky than last week's one, but I'm pretty sure that you guys will all be able to give me the right answer. So the question is, what was used to prevent moisture from getting into the granary? Just like last week, get mom and dad to pop me a message on Class Dojo, or if they give you permission to do it yourself, send me your answers on there. If you're having any trouble with anything we've covered in today's lesson, also let me know on Class Dojo. And if there are things that I've done in previous lessons that you want me to do again, things that I've done in this lesson that you really like and you want me to continue to do, let me know as well, and I'll do my best to keep that up. Have a great day, grade 5s, and I'll see you soon.